What is shake-a-lakin' knife nerds? Today we are going to take a interesting little journey down the road of skiff bearings. A small educational session with the knife nerd, if you will. So lately in a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm in, I've been noticing tons of guys asking lots of questions about skiff bearings. You know, what does it do for my action? Why would I upgrade it if my action is already good? What size do I need, etc., etc. Just a lot of buzz floating around about the skiff bearings, and with good reason. So let me start way back at the beginning of my skiff bearing journey. So this happened in early 2020 for me. When I discovered skiff bearings, I was modifying a Spyderco Domino, and if anybody has ever opened one of those up, you'll know that the caged bearings that come in those things they're crappy. Okay, they were just really bad caged bearings with some really cheapo plastic cages, and just an oddball size. So I was searching the web looking for the correct size bearings to swap into my Domino, and that is when I discovered skiff bearings, on a random Google search, just looking. And at the time, nobody was talking about skiff bearings. I may have actually been one of the first guys to mention it in the EDC group world over there on Facebook. That's where it all kind of exploded from there. So it actually happened in the Koenig knife group. In fact, you can probably go back and still find my thread that I posted from 2020 where I was like, you saw it here first, guys. Skiff bearings in a Koenig Arius. And after I posted that, it seemed like the skiff bearing trend, swapping skiff bearings into non-SkiffMade knives just exploded on the scene. Now everybody is doing it. Everybody is talking about skiff bearings. Everybody is swapping skiff bearings into all of their knives. And so, it was, I'm not saying that I started the trend, but I was definitely an early adopter of the skiff bearings well over a year ago. And I have watched it just blossom into a massive, trend. But there's just a lot of misconceptions, and today I hope I'm gonna kind of dispel some of the myths for you and help you to understand why people are swapping skiff bearings into their knives. Okay, so first, the biggest thing that people are talking about is it going to change the action of the knife? And actually, no, not at all. It's not going to change the action of the knife. And in fact, that is the absolute last reason you should even consider swapping skiff bearings into your knife. So for starters here, I've got some standard stock bearings. We're going to do a little comparison here so that we can get a better understanding what's going on. If I can get these guys dumped out. So I've got two different types of, whoops, drop that bad boy. I've got two different types of stock bearings here. These are 5mm ceramic caged bearings from an Asian knife, probably came out of a Wii or something like that. And then I have here the 3/16 inch stainless steel bearings that actually came out of a Protec Mordax. So the two most common sizes that are in most knives today are either 5mm for European or Asian made knives, or 3/16 inch for American made knives. In America, we use the Imperial system. Our bearings are 3/16 of an inch or 1/4 inch, and those are the standards. In the rest of the world, they use the metric system, so they have the 5mm or the 6mm, two different sizes that they use. They almost always use 5mm, with some exceptions. They have smaller sizes and they have larger sizes like we do, but more commonly, you're going to find 5mm in any Chinese-made knife, okay? And Italian-made knives as well. They all use 5mm bearings. So, those being your two most common sizes and styles. We've got stainless and we've got ceramic On the ceramic ones, these cages are just they're made out of brass and they're stamped. Okay, so they'll take you know, they're pressed with a little machine, and as you can see, it's shaped like a little cup, and that little cup retains the balls in the cage. Okay, one side is flat, one side is cupped. So actually that little cup can kind of trap and hold on to pocket lint, sand, grit, garbage can get into that little cup. And so that's kind of one of the cons of stock bearings right there, is that little cupped side. So on a SkiffMade bearing, the biggest difference is that you're getting a solid phosphor bronze cage. Come on guys, get out of there. So the SkiffMade cage is one solid piece of phosphor bronze. Okay, bronze is a pretty hard material. It's much harder than brass. It's probably close to as hard as the stainless bearings here, but of course way thicker. So you're right away, you know, you're getting a way stronger cage on your bearings. Okay, now the other big difference, I'm actually going to have to disassemble a knife here to show you. All of these knives have skiff bearings installed in them. Okay, now first thing I want to show you, all of these actions are buttery smooth and drop shutty. Okay, all riding on skiff bearings. Are the skiff bearings making my knife drop shutty? Absolutely not. Unequivocally no. The bearings are not making my knives drop shutty. Okay, so let me explain it to you. First thing I'm gonna do is get this little bad boy here taken apart. I'm gonna kind of scoot these guys, scooch them over there to the side, and we're gonna take a look at the interior of my arc form catalyst. This is a knife manufactured by WE Knives. Okay, almost okay, every single WE knife I have disassembled to date has taken 5mm bearings. Every one. So they're pretty consistent with what they do. You know, that maybe they have some other knives that take different size bearings. I don't know. But I've taken apart a lot of WEs and they all had 5mm bearings in them. So we're just going to get this thing apart here. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, this is a 5-screw disassembly to get into the arc form catalyst here real quick. T8s on the exterior and 2 little T6s in here holding the frame together. And then we're going to be in here and check out what's going on with the skiff bearings. Alright. Uno más. Alright. Okay. So right away you can see I already have skiff bearings installed in my arc form catalyst. These are 5mm skiff bearings. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show you is the fitment of the skiff bearings. So now we're going to take a standard 5mm, you know, standard stock 5mm Chinese bearing here and compare it to the 5mm skiff bearing. All right, so when you have your pivot, you know, this thing is a certain diameter, and that is where the bearing is actually kept into place. It's not the bearing pocket, okay, which is the little pocket here. They call this a counter bore. It's not this pocket that keeps your bearing in place. It's the pivot. Okay, you want the pivot to be what is keeping the bearing from moving back and forth, right? Ideally, some cheap junky made knives might not be built that way, but good knives are built that way. The bearings are supposed to ride closely to the pivot. So first of all, I want to show you the stock bearing. Okay, now we can see here, this is just a very, very loose, sloppy fit to the bearing, right? I mean, to the pivot. So there you have that. Let's get that garbage out of there, and then take a look at the skiff bearing. So this is a much, there's still a little bit of play there, but a much tighter fit. Okay, so when you actually look at it, I don't know if I can get this to focus. It looks like there is like almost no, no space between the pivot and the inner diameter of the bearing at all. It's a very, very precision fit. And so, like, literally, for example, on a 3/16 inch pivot, the diameter of the pivot barrel is 0.187 inches, and the diameter of the 3/16 inch bearing is 0.189 inside diameter. So literally there's like 2 thousandths of space between the inner diameter of the bearing cage and the outer diameter of the pivot. So it's a very, very precision fit. So one of the biggest reasons to upgrade to skiff bearings is the fitment. These are a way more precision made bearing that's made to fit your pivot in a much better way. Now, the second big thing is the ball count. So on a normal 5mm or 3/16 inch cage bearing, you have actually 9 balls in there total. Okay, now when you get a 5mm or a 3/16 inch skiff bearing, you have 11 balls in there. So you're going to actually add 4 balls to your total pivot count, your total ball count of your pivot there. So I think Skiff says that is actually a 22% increase in pivot rigidity. Okay, so when I say increase in pivot rigidity, let me get this thing on here so you can understand. So if you're getting some side to side torsion on your knife, it wants to go like this, right? So the more balls that are in the race, the more stable and stronger the pivot is against side to side play, in your knife. And so now in some other cases, with other skiff bearings, you can get even bigger ball count upgrades. So for example, on the J cape, this takes 1/4 inch skiff bearings on the J cape here. This is made by Riot, but it takes American sized bearings. Riot is the one exception in the Asian knife manufacturing world where they actually sometimes use American sized pivots and bearings. And I think they do that because they're the people that they're collaborating with, in this case Felix, or Mr. Sharp by Design guy over here, they might use an American sized pivot with American sized bearings, and Riot does that. We does not do that. We only uses metric stuff on their systems. So if you have a J cape that was version 3 is going to be made by We Knives, that's going to take 5mm bearings, period. If you have a J cape 3.5 that's made by Riot, this is going to take 1/4 inch bearings. But the point being, when you get this J cape, the 3.5, it's going to come with the standard 1/4 inch stock bearings, and they have 10 balls in them total. Okay, now when you upgrade to a skiff 1/4 inch bearing, they actually have 13 balls per side. So I took my pivot from having 20 total balls to having 26 total balls. So that's a pretty massive upgrade. That's a lot more stability in this pivot. Okay, it makes the pivot way stronger. Now, the other thing is, and this is a big one in the SBD Evo Typhoon, this one actually takes these multi-row skiffs with the 3/16 inch pivot. Okay, you can see that there's 2 rows of bearings in there. So this is going to be adding a whole lot of strength to the Evo Typhoon. The Evo Typhoon comes stock with 1/4 inch single row bearings, and you can actually upgrade to the multi-row 3/16 inch skiff bearings on this knife. This is a very rare pivot combination here. In fact, this is the only knife that I have found so far that can accept these skiff double row bearings. And so this actually went from having 20 total balls in the pivot to having 28 balls in the pivot. Yeah, I'm sorry, these are 14 ball, not 13 ball. See there, ball count 14. So 28 total balls versus 20 balls. That's a massive upgrade in side to side rigidity in this pivot. Okay, so that is the other major reason that people are upgrading to skiff bearings. And of course, you know, there's the fit and finish of the bearings. You know, Skiff actually takes these bearings, he makes them in batches of like 60. He makes a batch practically, you know, every week, maybe even twice a week sometimes. So if you head over to the Skiff website and that he is out, you know, out of stock on the size that you need, just check back the next day or the day after that or the following week. He's going to get them back in stock because he makes them all the time, because people are just buying these things like candy at this point in the game. So, you know, understand that he actually takes these, the cages are CNC machined. So he cuts the phosphor bronze cage on a CNC machine, and then he takes the whole batch of 60 bearings or whatever, and he puts them into a vibratory tumbler that has polishing media in it. And these cages are polished for 3 days. He told me this personally in an email. You know, that's how he manufactures them. He actually spends days polishing each batch of these bearings until they're just beautiful. And the fit and finish of these bearings, I'm sorry, but you're never going to find that in a stock factory bearing. So, you know, in addition to making your pivot way stronger and having a way more precision fit to your pivot, which leads to more consistency in your bearing pathway, okay, you're getting just this beautiful fit and finish. And I've actually, the ones that are in my Koenig Arias, the 3/16 inch skiffs that are in here, that phosphor bronze, I'm not sure why on this particular set, but they actually developed this beautiful purple patina. So the skiffs that are in here are like freaking purple, and they just look amazing. And so, you know, it's just it's a classy little upgrade for 12 bucks. I mean, come on, you bought a $350 knife and it comes with some generic janky little brass bearings, right? You spend another $12 and you put these amazing freaking works of art that Steve Skiff has put so much love and joy into, you know, for 12 bucks, you know, plus shipping. It's a no-brainer for me to upgrade every knife that I can fit skiff bearings into is just going to get them, period. And so, you know, that's just me. Is it going to change the action of your knife? No, not at all, not whatsoever. And people need to stop thinking that it is going to change the action of your knife, because that's not the purpose of this upgrade at all. It's not meant to make your knife drop shutty. It's not meant to make your knife smoother. It cannot do that. Why? So when your bearing is sitting in here, the balls are the only thing that are touching that race washer, okay? The cage does not touch that washer on the frame. The cage does not touch the blade. The only thing touching the blade are the little balls, okay, that the thing spins on. So if your knife is already riding on ball bearing, you know, ball bearing pivots, then it's already got all of the, you know, drop sheddiness and stuff that it can have, because it's already riding on balls. It's not going to get any better by changing to different balls. You understand what I mean? So why is my knife drop shutty and yours isn't? It isn't because I upgraded to skiff bearings. It's because my lock bar is adjusted correctly. So on a frame lock or a liner lock, the biggest determining factor in how the action is going to be on that knife is the amount of tension that the lock bar is putting on the blade. Okay, come on, focus. So you can see this is spring tension, right? So when your knife is in a closed position, just hope I don't cut myself here, that lock bar is putting spring tension against the blade, right? So when it's clamped down, you can see that that lock bar is actually pushing against the blade. So if the lock bar is pushing way too hard against the blade, it's creating friction between that little detent ball right there and the blade. So too much lock bar tension creates too much friction, hence no drop shutty action. Do you understand now? So your action is almost entirely determined by lock bar tension, not by bearings, the quality of the bearings. None of that matters at all, because it's riding on balls no matter what, right? So let me get back to disassembly here. And so that being said, I'm hoping to not keep this video way too freaking long. I hope I'm not missing anything too super important here. But to recap, is Skiff Bearings going to make your knife drop shutty? Absolutely not. If your knife is not drop shutty now, riding on stock bearings, it's not going to be drop shutty when you install Skiff Bearings. That's not how it works. If you want the knife to be drop shutty, there's only one option: to adjust the tension of the lock bar. Okay, now that's a whole nother type of video that we might get into one day. I might teach you how to adjust your lock bar, if you choose to do that. Of course, these are things that void your warranty. Installing Skiff Bearings is probably going to void your warranty. With most manufacturers, it is 100% confirmed that Koenig does not want you installing Skiff Bearings in their knives, and it does void your warranty if you do so. You know, they have stated that categorically. So and they have their reasons for doing that, and you know, as a manufacturer, that's their option to do that. You know, it is modifying your knife, and hence, you know, changing it from the factory spec. And if it causes problems for you, you know, that's not their problem. They didn't tell you to put Skiff Bearings in your knife, right? So I completely understand why it voids their warranty. That being said, I put Skiff Bearings in every knife I can fit them into, because A, I like the quality of the bearings, B, I like the rigidity, the stiffness that it gives me in my pivot. I mean, this thing feels like it's on freaking washers right now. Okay, very solid, stable pivots, and the bearings are always going to roll in a consistent pathway, because that fitment up to the pivot is so much tighter than a stock factory bearing over here. Oh, this is the stock bearing, that's a Skiff. Anyhow, so bearing pathway consistency, pivot strength, fit and finish, and you know, precision fitment to the whole bearing track. That's the reasons to upgrade to Skiff Bearings. It has nothing to do with the action. If your knife is not drop shutty now, it's not going to be drop shutty after you put Skiff Bearings in it. Okay, if you want it drop shutty, you need to change this tension right here. Okay, because that is what's, you know, restricting your blade from being drop shutty. So understand that, particularly with a ceramic detent, because ceramic is a little bit slightly abrasive. If this lock bar is pressing way too hard against the tang of the blade, the back of the blade side here, then you're going to have too much friction there, and the knife can't fall shut, because there's too much friction being created from the lock bar. And you can even do a little experiment with this yourself. If you take your thumb and hold it hold the lock bar in and just swivel that back and forth, you'll see that there is, you know, I'm holding the lock bar off of the blade. There is absolutely no restriction here at all. I mean, this thing is just, it's insanely, you know, loose, no restriction. And then once I let the lock bar go, there's a little bit of friction there, right? So that perfect balance of friction is what you're looking for to get a drop shutty knife. It also makes a difference in smoothness. If the lock bar is too strong, it can actually make your action feel gritty, because the bearing, the little detent ball, is actually knocking little tiny fine dents into the steel of the blade. And as that bearing, you know, the detent ball rides across those little dents that it pops in there, it'll actually feel a little bit gritty. So the only way to fix that is to remove some of the lock bar tension, to soften how much pressure the lock bar is putting against the blade. Okay, that's how you get smooth action. That's how you get drop shutty action, is by having a correctly tuned lock bar, not a bearing upgrade. Okay, there are plenty of reasons to upgrade to skiff bearings. Drop shuttiness is not one of them. And so I just, you know, I've seen so many people asking like, well, my action is already good, why would I upgrade? Well, you're upgrading because it's $12 for a set of skiff bearings, and they're freaking awesome. They're way better than the stock bearings in many, many ways. No, they're not going to change your action, but they're better in other ways. And that's why you upgrade to skiffs. You're not upgrading to try and improve the action. You're upgrading to improve the quality of the bearings and their interaction with your pivot, making your pivot stronger, having a better fitment in the whole system. That's the reason to upgrade to skiff bearings. So I hope you guys have a complete understanding. Go check out Mr. SkiffMade Blades website, and if he don't have the bearings you want in stock, just wait a couple days, he'll have them. And other than that, man, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and stick around for more reviews. Later.